Listen, I know you guys love your waifus and whatnot, but you're really running out of fan service picks, so I would recommend voting for one of the male characters next time. You know, add some variety to the series. But as you can tell, the votes were cast, and as I predicted, this episode is going to be on the Assassin of Red, aka the Queen of Assyria, Semiramis. Now, since we're doing another assassin, I don't really need to explain the general information about the class, but if you haven't seen the last episode or any of my other ones, then go ahead and check the description for some links to those. So let's get right into this episode with who exactly Semiramis was back when she was alive, starting with her historical legend rather than the fate-altered version. If you weren't already aware, Semiramis is best known for being the only woman to have ever ruled the Assyrian Empire, an ancient Mesopotamian kingdom located just north of Egypt that represented one of the great empires of the ancient Middle East. Now, a queen was not as commonplace as you'd think back in 9th century BC, so when a female ruler of a great ancient city makes an appearance, it's bound to leave more of an impact than a king. Although it's not 100% known that she did in fact come into absolute power as the queen, it was determined that she did hold enough political power to establish change in Assyria. Even so, being a female in power is not impact enough to create a legend worthy of being summoned in the Holy Grail War. There's more to her than just being a queen. The question that needs to be answered here is, what did she do as Queen of Assyria to warrant such an everlasting legend? Well, the most recent historical update on Semiramis' legend begins with her birth. It's said that she was born from the Syrian goddess Derketo and a Syrian man. However, since one was a goddess and the other a mere man, Semiramis was abandoned by both as a baby and taken care of by doves. Yes, you know, the birds that are basically just white-colored pigeons. After that, she was adopted by the chief shepherd of the Assyrian king, and a few years later after that, the governor of Syria, Anas, meets Semiramis and chooses to marry her. Now, this is where she begins to actually do something. Anas, who was sent away to battle, was missing his lovely wife and asked her to come to the city that he was sieging. Semiramis not only goes to the city, but also develops the strategy that helps them win the battle. This news made its way to the king, and the king became curious as to what type of woman could possibly come up with a successful battle strategy. Because remember, this was 9th century BC, so women's rights weren't exactly a thing back then. Of course, once the king saw Semiramis, he immediately fell in love with her and demanded that Anas give his wife to him in exchange for one of his daughters. Anas of course refused because, let's be honest, would you give her up? Probably not, right? But after many persistent threats from the king and knowing that he wouldn't be able to keep her, Anas went and took his own life. So the now widowed Semiramis married the king and became the Queen of Assyria. However, within a few years the king had died, and since their son was not yet of age, Semiramis became the person in charge. During her time in power, she became known for her building projects in the form of beautiful cities, temples, and palaces. They even believed that she was behind the design of the second wonder of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. But there's no actual evidence to support that. After Babylon's construction, she decided to try to expand the Assyrian Empire by invading India and more into Africa. But it was during this time that an oracle had mentioned to her that her son would conspire to take the throne from her. This turned out to be true, but before Semiramis could be killed by her son, she decided to simply give up the power instead of trying to hold on to it. So that's essentially the historic version of the legend, at least the most recent one as told by National Geographic. There's a lot of parallels to the stories of Hercules and Moses, so I could see why she would be considered a candidate for the Holy Grail War. But the fate-altered version of the story, as you would expect, makes things a little bit more interesting. She was still born from the Syrian goddess and was still left as a child, and the doves still ended up taking care of her. She also still married Anas and ended up getting taken away by the king. But that's pretty par for the course for any legend. Someone argued that that's even pretty boring. It was after her marriage with the king that solidified her position as the assassin. It's believed that a few days after the marriage, Semiramis poisoned the king, becoming the first known person in history to murder someone through poison. So no, Semiramis wasn't some crazy skilled killer straight out of Assassin's Creed Origins, although that would have been pretty cool too. She's just someone who used her beauty and knowledge to sleep her way to the top, and then assassinated one person in the process. I'm sorry if you were expecting something a little bit more epic, but her lore isn't nearly as interesting as her characteristics as a servant. As a character in Fate Apocrypha, she differs from other assassins in the sense that she doesn't attempt to really hide her murders. She's not one of those assassins that likes to conceal their presence before going in for the kill. Instead, she's able to assassinate people by planning a set of actions in advance that will eventually lead to the outcome of death for her target. Now, considering that she's the oldest poisoner in the world, it's pretty odd that her entire arsenal is based more around magic than it is poisoning, which brings up one of her unique abilities to be summoned as both a caster and an assassin, meaning that she can use the class skills like Presence Concealment from the Assassin class and Item Construction or Familiar Summonings from the Caster class. Also, remember when I was talking about Jack that I had mentioned that Presence Concealment only keeps you hidden until you get ready to attack? Well, since Semiramis is a poisoner, it's technically not a direct attack on her opponent, so the Presence Concealment skill can still remain in full effect even when she's in the act of poisoning or preparing to poison someone. But her background in poisoning also has its drawbacks because it limits her item creation skill to only poisons rather than other magical items and weapons that would be more ideal for other types of combat. Now, this next skill combines with her main noble Phantasm to create that crazy flying base that the Red faction uses as a headquarters. This skill is called Territory Creation, and it allows casters to create a terrain that gives them the advantage in a fight. Since Territory Creation combines with her main noble Phantasm, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, she is considered to have the strongest territory. But aside from being stupidly massive and can float to give them the high ground, it also has some other little features. Obviously, it's based off of the speculated historical version of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is known to be one of the greatest engineering feats of its time with multiple ascending tiers of gardens. If you were to pay close enough attention to the Fate Apocrypha version, you'd see that it matches quite closely to the description given to it in terms of the floors of marble, stone balconies, and lots of pillars surrounded by vegetation. But because it also carries a small army that can replenish itself, it's most accurately described as the unification of unsightly disorder and luxurious beauty. However, this isn't a noble Phantasm that can simply be cast at any time. Just like Caster's super OP Golem, real-world items are required before the gardens can be created. And just like Jack's noble Phantasm, Maria the Killer, conditions must also be met with those materials. Just like anything else that needs to be built, it takes time for the construction process to finish. 3 days are spent with a fixed amount of water, soil, stone, and other organic materials gathered from Semiramis' home, which in modern day would be around the areas bordering Baghdad and Iraq. And when I say 3 days, I mean 72 straight hours are spent doing an incantation that basically pieces together the mythical gardens. I say mythical because there's an added aspect of mystery, which is a type of magic that can strengthen the gardens as a fortress. This mystery comes from the fact that there's no evidence supporting Semiramis' involvement with the construction of the gardens, or that she was even around to see it when she was alive. So 72 hours are needed to create the fortress and bring it to reality. People thought that it was her brilliance that gave birth to the gardens, so many historians included it into her legend, thus combining this epic landscape with her story. Although we haven't seen Assassin fight yet, she's said to gain a significant amount of power when fighting in the gardens, much like how Vlad is able to go toe-to-toe with Karna on his home field. That being said, if she was to leave the gardens, her fighting potential would drop significantly and she probably wouldn't be able to beat anyone in a one-on-one fight. That's pretty much expected for any assassin though, especially when her second noble Phantasm isn't even a close combat weapon. It's called the Sikera Ušum, the arrogant king's alcohol. It's the same poison she used to kill the king with. This noble Phantasm turns her surrounding environment into poisonous items, air and mana included. It also makes all of her attacks poisonous as well. She can even manifest the poison into chains that she can fight with, or summon phantasmal beasts that can fight for her too. But once again, that's only if she's in the gardens. All in all, the Assassin of Red appears to be a servant that is only strong in specific scenarios. In a typical Holy Grail war, she'll most likely get body, even with the skills of both caster and assassin on her side. She seems to rely very heavily on the Hanging Gardens, which would definitely be too hard to summon in a normal Holy Grail war anyways. It's funny though that all her power comes from a part of her legend that she wasn't even around for. That just goes to show once again how much the legend can really affect a servant's abilities. We've yet to see her full potential in the show, but I think we'll definitely get to see something or the other soon, especially since there's only a few more episodes left. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys on the Assassin of Red. If you want to say in who I cover for next week's episode, yes, I said next week, not 2 weeks, then go and vote in the poll under the community section. I'm adding a special option this week due to popular demand, so don't miss out on your chance to see who you want. But as always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao!